welcome to the Onyx Path Twitch channel. I am Travis Legg, the programming coordinator for Onyx Path, and today I have the extreme honor, pleasure, joy of speaking with Meghan Fitzgerald. Meghan, how are you doing this evening?
All right. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us.
Yeah,
I guess just to kick things off, for those who may not know who you are, if you could tell us who you are, what you do, your pronouns, and a little bit about what got you into our lovely industry.
sure. Pronouns are she, her. Let's see, who am I? I am the developer for second edition Changeling the Lost, and now also second edition Mage the Awakening for Chronicles of Darkness. I also develop other books for other lines here and there, including Exalted and Scion right now. And I've been writing in the industry for almost 6 years. My very first project was the Promethean, the Created second edition core book. So that, which, came out about I want to say a year and a half after it started. So it came out not too long ago, but work started on it a lot earlier. So um, let's see what else. I've written on a whole bunch of projects, obviously for Onyx Path, but also for a few other companies, Green Renine, their Modern Age
Okay.
line, and in particular, also in addition, their threefold setting for Modern Age by Malcolm Shepard, which is really cool. I've done some writing with Rose Bailey's independent work. Yeah, and a few, the Modifius, a couple others. So I'm around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what uh, prompted you to start in this line of work? What drew you to writing role playing games?
Well, so I've been playing role playing games since I want to say freshman year of high school. D&D second edition, and even before that though, like I would play board games and card games and stuff. And I remember when I was a kid, like uh even then, like I would play, a CCG or something and be like, I just read this book and I played this game and now I want to make my own version of this game for this fantasy setting that I just read. And I've been making games since I was 10. So um but I hadn't really thought, oh, and I've been writing forever too, just fiction and also in my work, and stuff like that. So by the time it kind of occurred to me, like the Onyx Path did an open call for writers that they were advertising at the time, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but I had done a ton of homebrew for my own games at home, especially Exalted second edition, but also for Chronicles of Darkness and other games that my group had played, and just writing mechanics and stuff like that was already something I was doing. And so when I saw the open call, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. So that was it. Here I am.
Well, that's awesome, and thank you for doing that because it has resulted in a very impressive and very enjoyable body of work.
Well, thank you.
Um, yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of your stuff. And speaking of your stuff, uh, as you mentioned earlier, you're the Changeling the Lost and Mage the Awakening. And your Mage the Awakening you took on relatively recently as developer. Is that accurate and fair to say?
Yep. Yeah. The second edition Mage developer was Dave Brookshaw, who did an absolutely amazing job updating Mage to second edition. I really, really love it. And I've worked for him a few times. I've worked with him a few times on other books, and we hang out at conventions and stuff, and we talk about Mage a lot. And yeah, when he decided he was going to step down, just for time reasons and whatever else, he recommended me to be his successor, and I was very honored, and very proud to hear that. So, yeah, Mage is my favorite game, so I was really ecstatic about that.
That's awesome. It's so does it feel, obviously people that work in this industry tend to, though not always, tend to love what they're working on. You tend to gravitate towards submitting for games you enjoy and things like that.
Yeah.
But do you feel, I guess, to put it in a more general sense, how do you feel taking the wheel of that, of your favorite line? How does that register with you? How does that feel?
Well, I when he first mentioned it, I gotta say I was bowled over. It felt like I couldn't believe it. And now I'm just so excited. I've got Night Horrors, the Mage Night Horrors book, Nameless and Accursed, that's coming up. It's in layout right now, and that'll be the first Mage book that I've developed. That one I started developing while Dave was still line developer, so he and I worked closely on it, and I sent everything to him for review and everything like that. Um, and so that'll be the first one that I've developed, and then the first one that I develop as Mage developer will be Tome of the Pentacle, which was already planned and already announced. And I'm going to be working with Dave, to get his take on what he was planning for the book and all of that. So, um, yeah, I'm just super super excited.
That's really cool. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to hear that. Before we go too far down a mage rabbit hole, which I know can happen, um, I'm a huge fan of Ascension myself,
Okay.
and I'm doing some work on. I did some work on Technocracy Reloaded, and I have a couple other
Cool.
things theoretically in the pipeline for that. So um, we could talk about magic all night, but before we get into that, I do want to definitely give some attention to Changeling. So when did you come on board for Changeling the Lost as a developer?
So, Changeling was one, but that was actually my first job as developer was the Changeling second edition core book. Rose Bailey was developing it, and she wanted a co-developer. Um, because she at the time she was also the development producer for Onyx Path, and she was developing Cavaliers of Mars, and she's had tons and tons of stuff on her plate, and she wanted somebody to come on board and co-develop Changeling with her. And she asked me to do it. I think I was actually on the Star Trek cruise at the time and didn't have internet, and I had like just that day I was like, I should really check email. It's been a few days. I'm going to pay for internet just for like an hour. And so I log in and I get this email from Rose where she's like, hey, do you want to co develop Changeling with me? And I'm like, I'm really glad that I decided to pay the money to check my email right now. But yeah, it was really exciting. And so I started on that. Rose taught me the ropes and showed me what to do, and we worked on the outline together. We worked on the second edition setting Bible together, and it was a really great experience. I loved working with Rose.
And Rose has been a very prolific developer, uh, pretty much forever.
Yeah.
Which is a habit that seems to have passed along to you as well. You have a lot of irons in the fire, it would be fair to say, right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
Seems to be somewhat common affliction in our business. Um, so
Sleep, what's that?
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we'll have plenty of time for that, in our sunset years. Work ourselves raw while we're young enough to enjoy it. So, in now, when you took the reins on Changeling, was that prior to the second edition switchover?
No, it was so she and I worked on the second edition core book, and then after that she handed the line over to me. so that she could pursue other things.
Gotcha. Okay. And
Yeah.
so now I know that there have been a few post core book releases, and I have not. I'm not probably as familiar with some of the Chronicles stuff, particularly the second edition Chronicles stuff, as I would like to be. Uh, and in case somebody in our audience is not, can you kind of walk us through what is available and what's in the immediate pipeline for Changeling Second Edition?
Sure. So the core book got kickstarted. Actually, I think it was the first second edition core book to get a Kickstarter. Um, and so in that Kickstarter, we hit a couple of stretch goals that created new products. So that's what we're working on right now. So there's the core book, there's the Jumpstart Hearts on Trial, which is also available already, which is a set of ready-made characters and an adventure that you can play through at your table. It's an introduction to Changeling. It's got a pared down version of all the rules in there so that you don't need the core book to start out with it. It's meant to be, like an introduction to the game for people who haven't played it, or just something you can pull out and run on the fly um, with ease. And then the other two books that came out of the Kickstarter were, well, let's start with the companion. So Oak, Ash, and Thorn is the Changeling companion. It's kind of like this is an expansion of material that some stuff that got cut from the core book because we didn't have space, and then just some other things that we wanted to cover. And so that's in, oh my gosh, that's in layout right now, I want to say, or post edit. I'm not sure. It's somewhere in limbo in the process right now.
Sure.
And then the other one was Kith and Kin, which is sort of like a player's guide. And one of the big things with Kith and Kin was that, in the core book, we didn't have much space to put Kiths, which are sort of the big, like, tertiary character option, or depending on how you look at that. And so Kith and Kin has a whole chapter that's nothing but new kits, but it also has a bunch of other stuff that's sort of player's guide stuff. And that is in red lines right now. So I'm working on getting that back to the authors for second drafts. And that's what we've got so far.
Okay. And does that complete the Kickstarter sort of plan? So once those are done, does that open into new territory, or are there still some Kickstarter stretch goals that will still be kind of in development?
No, that's it for me. I think there's also I want to say there's an anthology that came out of that too, but I don't handle that. That's Matt McElroy does the fiction.
Right.
So yeah. But other than that, yeah, that's it.
Cool. Well, congratulations on that too. I know that's a good place to be at when you can see the finish line of, of the mountain of work that can land in your lap after a good Kickstarter.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for both those books to come out. I think that people are going to really enjoy the stuff that's in there, and it really covers the rest of the basic stuff that we had wanted to put in the core and didn't get to. So it'll be good.
Gotcha. And so, what would be your elevator pitch for Changeling the Lost? Let's say somebody's, just unfamiliar with the property.
All right. Let's see. Changeling is a game where, so it's based on the the old fairy stories of fairies coming and stealing children and replacing them with fake ones, which is changelings, right? So in Changeling the Lost, you are the child or the person who got kidnapped by the Fae, and you spent some period of time in the fairy world as a prisoner of the Fae. And then now you have escaped and you've come back to the real world and you're different. You're a fairy creature now, and you have to figure out what to do with your life while always knowing that the minions of the Fae are always going to be coming after you to take you back. And so you have to fight against that and figure out how to reinvent your life and find a new place for yourself in the world.
Okay, that's very cool. I like it. I know I've I've seen a bit of. We have one regularly scheduled actual play that of Changeling the Lost on the channel, and then we
Cool.
had a uh, one of the channels that we sort of produce shows in association with, Devil's Luck Gaming, did like a limited play, and they are like next level streaming. They do like full on costumes and makeup, and
Oh, cool.
it's a really if you have not yet done so, I highly recommend checking that out. They have them,
Yeah.
I think, posted on their YouTube channel. But yeah, really impressive makeup work, and they build sets for each of their games. They have a Scarred Land stream they run where they've got like this giant vinyl map of Gelspad hanging behind them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they all
Oh,
dress
that's
in full
cool.
pirate regalia. Yeah, they're not playing around.
Yeah. No, I'll have to check that out. That's awesome.
But yeah, I checked out their Changeling the Lost stream, and I was very captivated by it because it um, struck me as being so, I'm a relatively old school fella, so my familiarity with games involving the Fae is far more leaning in the Changeling Dreaming, Old World of Darkness direction.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
so I just kind of never got into Changeling Lost, and then when I checked it out, it seems so radically uh, different in approach.
Yeah, I would say I mean for the second edition of Chronicles of Darkness, we've definitely veered away in every line, veered away from their original roots in the classic World of Darkness games. But I would say even from the get-go, even from first edition when it was New World of Darkness, Changeling is probably the most different from its sort of classic World of Darkness parent.
Right. and and yet in a fashion that, at least from what it felt like in watching it being played, uh, still retains the level of wonder and, I guess, for lack of a better word, magic that I think would grab like a lapsed fan, somebody who hadn't played in 10 years, didn't know what Changeling the Lost was. You know what I mean? They haven't been around.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that same sense of wonder could easily be recaptured.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely. And it pulls on all of the same, the same Fey mythos, all of the same, fairy tales and fairy stories from around the world and that kind of thing. Both games definitely pull from the same well. It's just they approach it from two kind of opposite angles.
right, very very different angles, which is awesome, super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, I can't recommend highly enough to go check that out. I think you would get a huge kick out of it. They are um, just all around amazing in their presentation and in their performances.
Cool.
Which is not to take anything away from Little Brook Reunion, which runs here on Saturdays. They're amazing as well.
Nice.
So definitely check them out if you have a chance as well. So, when do you have any sort of roadmap post post Kickstarter fulfillment for the line?
So I do, but I can't talk about
Excellent.
it.
That is often the case. We
Yeah.
don't want to throw too much out there.
Yeah.
That might later change down the line. Well, shifting gears a bit, with regards to Mage the Awakening, I guess a couple questions. One, in terms of like release order, Mage the Awakening First Edition came out prior to Changeling the Lost Second, or Changeling the Lost First Edition, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Did that order remain through as things were getting their second edition, or did that shift up?
Yeah, Mage was, oh gosh, I want to say Mage was the third one. I think it was Vampire and then Werewolf and then Mage for second edition. And so yeah, Mage Second has been out for a little while, and then it's got Signs of Sorcery as its first supplement, which is amazing. So anybody who plays mage, please check out Signs of Sorcery. It's so good. And then the next one will be the Night Horrors book that's in layout right now.
Excellent. And that was also kickstarted, yes, or was that just
No,
okay?
no. I think I want to say Changeling was the first second edition game to be kickstarted. I think at around the time that Changeling Second was coming out or was being worked on, they had decided to kind of try something new and kickstart a core, and it's the first one I think to have the first second edition core to have a print run, and which also came out of the Kickstarter. But no, when Mage came out, it just came out. There was no Kickstarter for that one.
Okay, gotcha. We do have a question from chat real quick. Digital
Mhm.
Draco asks, how convertible is first edition Mage Changeling with second edition? Can I use the older books at all?
Yeah, so I would say pretty compatible. Some of the mechanics have changed kind of drastically, but the setting is all pretty much the same for the most part. I mean, there are some changes, but um, Mage in particular has a ton of first edition material that digs into the setting because Mage's setting is so big, and most of that stuff is still completely usable. And Changeling too, and Changeling had a limited run, but every book that came out for Changeling First Edition had some very very cool setting stuff, antagonists, and very interesting like um, new concepts of what you could do with the game, and a lot of that is definitely still applicable. I would say it's not that hard to convert the stuff, anything that actually needs changing, like whether it's on the mechanics side or just tweaks to the setting that need to be made based on some changes. I don't think it would be that hard to do.
I was going to say I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, out of all the systems that Onyx Path is currently working on, my knowledge is probably weakest in Chronicles. So, and when every time I open my mouth, I feel like I need to preamble it with that. Um,
Okay.
but but I would think that if you grabbed that God Machine Chronicle conversion, like PDF that they have at Drive-Through that's free,
Hmm.
I would think that would handle most of your system concerns
Yeah, pretty
pretty
much. I mean,
well.
anything that's not game specific. Yeah, you could just grab that the rules update and run with it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the question, Digital Draco. Appreciate it. If you have any questions in the chat, please do make sure you type question in all caps at the beginning, just so that we don't miss them. Um, and that also, you'd mentioned the size of the world of Mage, and that's something that I've spoken. I just had Dawkins on. We did a Q&A about Mummy,
Hmm.
um, and one of the things that we were speaking about a little bit was the Chronicles books being more of a toolbox than a prescribed meta plot.
Yeah.
And so, how have you found any specific challenges, or have you found it to be especially freeing when working with these worlds that are uh, comparatively large? Like if you look at the tools in that toolbox, my understanding is that Mage the Awakening, for example, has far more tools in its box than, say, Vampire the Requiem.
Hmm.
Just in terms of
Yeah.
things existing within the setting.
Yeah. Yeah, so I find it really freeing. I really like that we can kind of go in lots of different directions and create new things without um being beholden to a very like an established plot. Now that's not to say that there aren't established events in the setting history, because there definitely are. But it's not a currently moving meta plot. So it's more like these things happened in the past, and now here we are in the present. Go, which I
Gotcha.
find to be really, really exciting to work with. That kind of toolboxy thing. And I,
And so now, when you're working on something, or incorporating, I guess I should say, something along the lines of like dark eras or things along those lines,
mhm.
does that is that something that you uh, need to give some sort of mental processor power to? Like, okay, we're going to talk about, be it the 1970s or the 1470s.
Yeah.
How do we need to figure that into what's going on with our toolbox as opposed to our meta plot? Is that something that comes up?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually one of the three co-developers of the Dark Eras 2 project that's coming up.
Okay.
And so that's been on my mind a lot. And we worked really hard to communicate constantly with other developers and other folks as we were going along so that we didn't, blatantly contradict anything that was in a book already. We didn't, we want, so in general, there's been a trend lately, especially with First Beast, the Primordial, which was more of a crossover aimed line, and then Contagion Chronicle, which is the actual crossover game.
Right.
And so with all of that, and with Dark Eras, which is also full of crossovers, we've been kind of figuring out our process where when something comes out that's got history in it or setting specifics, um, we look back and say, oh, say we're doing a setting in London. What other second edition games have mentioned London and what's happened there, so that we don't contradict it, but also so that we can find some cool like tie-ins. If we can
Right.
say, oh, Mage covered London, and so if we're going to cover London in a later Changeling book, say, I would want to look back at the Mage book and see if there's any crossover opportunity there. And usually in a supplement that's for a specific line, we're not going to do much crossover because we have so much to cover with that line already, and it's not really that's not really the place for it. But in something like a Dark Era or in a Contagion Chronicle supplement or something like that, it's I always love to pull in little details like that and sprinkle them around. In fact, there is one detail mentioned in the Changeling second core book that comes from one of the Changeling Dark Eras that I developed because I just wanted to tie them together. So I love that stuff.
So is this like an Easter egg? Should we have like people try to find it? Try to find
Yeah,
what
but
this little
I think
crossover
they
is?
actually have found it already because I think I mentioned it a while back on say on the Pathcast or on some of the podcast or something. I mentioned it and people were hunting around and they found it. So I think they have
Gotcha.
found it already, but anybody who hasn't, feel free to go looking.
Yep. Yep. Go dig. Absolutely. No, then that stuff to me is always something I've really liked, and it is something that I think if you get too heavy-handed with metaplot, can lose its luster in a hurry. Which is those little hooks and Easter eggs and uh, cross mentions. Um, if you pepper too much of that in, then you wind up you know uh, just choking people on names.
Yeah.
And there's no real. But if it's done rarely enough, or if it's not, if it's more of like a side dish as opposed to the main meal, I think that's a much cooler approach to be able to take. And so, in working now, did you do any work on Contagion Chronicle?
I did. Actually, I wrote the character splats, the five sworn and the three false groups. And Matthew actually asked me to write them before the rest of the book got written, so that the other writers kind of had a foundation to work with, so that we could tie them into everything that was in the book, because they're kind of the core I don't want to say like motivation or core the character options that give a group a reason to be together. And so we really wanted to make sure that those were solid before the rest of the book got written. So
So
that was incredibly fun.
they're kind of like the narrative driver
Yeah.
of everything else.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so, in working on something like that, or something like the Dark Eras, because at at first glance, the Chronicles of Darkness system looks very elegant in terms of crossover,
Hmm.
and on a surface level. As you were digging into these projects, things like Contagion Chronicle or things like Dark Eras, did you find some areas where it required uh, extra elbow grease to make it remain so, or did it come together pretty consistently and seamlessly?
Um, It works together pretty seamlessly. I mean, when they developed the second edition update to the system, or what was then the God Machine Chronicle update, um, they did it with a very forward thinking, uh, from a very forward thinking viewpoint, and they knew that they wanted to make it possible to, play all of the games in the same universe rather than each one in its own individual universe. And so the core system is already set up to do that, and so it really isn't very difficult. One of the things that we've been doing is, in Dark Eras, for instance, a couple of the chapters, and it depends on the line too, because some game lines fit in really well mechanically. Like there's not that much um, that's all that strange when you mix the lines together. But then some of them, like, the questions that I get about crossover are always about Mage, because Mage covers so much of that metaphysical background of the setting
Right.
that, and while the supernal is not responsible for any of the other phenomena from the other games, it can study them all, right? And everything fits into one of the arcana somewhere. And so, if you have a mage character in a game with other characters, or a game, even if it's a mage game but features crossover elements, you're going to have the mage player saying, "Hey, I want to use Mage Sight and study everything because that's how you get arcane beats." And so,
Right.
that kind of thing is the questions I get are usually about Mage. And so, like, one of the Dark Eras that I developed, the Wild West one, is a Mage Changeling era, and I devoted a pretty good chunk of the kind of storyteller section of that chapter to how, like, ways that you can cross over changeling and mage mechanics so that they can interact more fully with each other. And then, of course, out of the Contagion Kickstarter, we got the that little, like, crossover mechanics guide, that I'm working on too, uh, which has a lot more of that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Cool. That's awesome. That is good to hear, because that's the kind of thing that, like, uh, you know, when you're sitting down, you're in the heat of the moment at the table. Sometimes a story guide might get caught up on. Those
yeah,
little minutia can sometimes knock the legs out from under a narrative. So knowing that it's kind of smooth, and that there's more resources coming to keep it smoother, is awesome to hear.
cool.
Um,
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
yeah, it's very exciting. So I know we've covered a lot of Chronicles of Darkness stuff. Before we branch out further, are there any areas of Changeling or Mage that we haven't discussed, or of Contagion Chronicle, uh, or any other Chronicles game that we haven't discussed that you wanted to touch on? Anything that we haven't specifically addressed that you wanted to bring up or let the people at home know about?
Um, hmm. No, that's pretty much it. Anything else that's kind of coming down the pike, it's either stuff I can't talk about, or it's Tome of the Pinnacle, which has already been announced. Oh, but we were talking about that sort of history aspect of it, with, historical details in the mage setting. Tome of the Pinnacle is going to cover a lot of that. It's so in first edition we had the order, each order had its own book. This one is less the orders individually and more how do the orders and how do the caucuses kind of across the world work together, because that's sort of a new idea in second edition that wasn't really in first edition much, that the caucuses are more of a broad setting aspect, a broad set piece, um, that gets the mages across the world talking to each other, or just ways that you can work together with other mages elsewhere. And so those relationships and kind of the history of the pentacle as a whole rather than individual orders is what that book is probably going to cover. I mean, it's not outlined yet, but that's the idea.
That's kind of where you're at in terms of what you'd like to bring to the table at this point.
Yeah, well, and it was Dave's plan for the book too. So that's one where I'm going to be working with him to get his notes on what he was planning to do with it, and work from there.
Cool. And I guess just in the name of equal airtime, if nothing else, I did not ask you your elevator pitch for Mage. Think you can
Oh,
squeeze Mage into an elevator pitch?
um, sure. Mage is a game about occult detectives who are addicted to mysteries, and so uh, they they use magic to pursue their occult obsessions and uh, walk the line between wisdom and hubris all the time. And by walk the line, I usually mean fall off hardly. It's a game about power breeding hubris and being addicted to knowing everything that there is to know about magic and reaching enlightenment.
That is beautiful, and honestly, cast it in just listening to that and being a rather unapologetic Buffy fan, that cast it in like a Willow-esque light that I've never quite heard it cast in before.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll have to try to look at it with a different set of eyes.
I
You
too
know,
love Buffy. You're not alone.
I've heard that it's a relatively well enjoyed property somewhere on the internets. But no, that's a compelling angle to me too. Is the idea of it's one of the things I loved the most when I saw the um, the switch over from old to new was the
Yeah.
focus on the hubris side, and that like bring it to a very very personal level. Um, that was probably the hardest like first edition Chronicles game for me to swallow because I am a huge Mage the Ascension fan. So,
Gotcha.
so
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, these ideas are fine, but they're all wrong. You know.
No
And
edition wars. They're all
right.
good.
No, yeah, exactly. Well, right now I have the emotional distance to recognize that. But,
Yeah, yeah.
at the time I was heartbroken.
Oh no.
Um, and but in looking at it, going back to it, I've not had the opportunity to delve too deeply into the second edition rules, though. Again, and I swear I'm not doing this just to plug everybody's show, but Occultist Anonymous that runs here on Fridays, are really adept at presenting what can be sometimes a very arcane, no pun intended, um, process of like spell casting and how all those things work together in a
Yeah.
very digestible way for the audience. So you're playing
Cool.
along, and understand what's going on, and they keep the story bumping, and it's a lot of fun, and it definitely has won me over in ways I didn't expect it to.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
super
cool.
cool. Did somebody just ask me in chat what Buffy is? You're gonna get. That's
It
how you
sounds.
get.
I
How
hope
you get.
that's sarcastic.
That's how you get muted around these parts. So so moving beyond Chronicles of Darkness, because I know you've done some work outside of this sort of ecosystem, both with Onyx Path and outside.
Mhm.
What else have you recently worked on for Onyx Path outside of Chronicles, and do you have anything lined up outside of Chronicles at the moment?
Yes, so let's see. So I've been working on Scion as well. I'm developing this Scion companion, which is, I want to say that's also in layout somewhere. Which is, it's got several new pantheons in it, and it updates the rest of the Loa to second edition, or yeah, to go kind of as a companion pantheon to the Orisha that are in the core, or in Hero, I should say. So I've been working on that, and I also am I wrote for Demigod, and I love Scion. It's very, very cool. And let's see what else. I've been developing the monthly releases for the Exalted Adversaries of the Righteous and 100 Devils Night Parade. And I've also I write bits and pieces here and there for Exalted when I have time. It's a line that I have a long and tumultuous history with, like many. Um, but Eric and Vance, the two Exalted line developers, are amazing. They're so great to work with, and I love them. Um, and Lauren Roy actually has joined me recently as co-developer on Adversaries and Hundred Devils, which has been amazing. She is so good. She's written for a ton of stuff for Onyx Path, and she actually has some novels out. If anybody wants to go check out Lauren Roy's novels, because she's awesome. Yeah, so and I write for Eric and Vance when I have time. And I think I've written for I want to say two classic World of Darkness books. It's been a while actually since I worked on World of Darkness, but I have. Um, that was a long time ago. Well, a long time ago. It was a few years ago.
Ages ago.
So long ago. It feels like forever ago.
I'd put in my Nine Inch Nails CD and I would listen.
Yeah, back in those heady days of like 2013. But yeah, and then so yeah, for Onyx Path, I want to say that's it right now. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
So and how is that? Can you talk a little bit about that the Hundred Devils experience? Because that's kind of a new, or I guess a non-traditional approach to a release that they're doing for Exalted, right? Where
Yeah,
it's sort of being piecemealed out.
yeah. So we started that a while ago, actually, and it was a new process for everybody involved, and so we kind of figured it out as we went along. Kind of like, how much of the content do we create ahead of time? How much do we create on the fly? What's the process? And kind of figuring out how to do it. I think we've hit a pretty good stride at this point because we've been doing it for so long. But yeah, it's been an interesting process, and it's one of those things where it's nice, especially for Adversaries. I was able to get a lot of different writers on board because it's very easy to parcel out individual antagonist entries like that to different writers. And so, we had a couple of writers where they were like, yeah, well, I can only take 3K. And I'm like, all right, well, that's fine. That's 3 antagonist entries. Go nuts. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience.
Well, and that's part of the reason that aside from just general interest, I personally am kind of interested in your thoughts on it too, because we're doing something somewhat similar. We announced Vigil Watch and Yugman's Guide to Gelspad for Scarred Lands.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
2020, and we'll be doing something somewhat similar with the release. I think it's a little different.
Yeah.
Partially due to trails that were blazed in that process.
Yeah, no,
so
definitely.
Thank you for that.
We definitely had some takeaways from it that we were like, yeah, I spoke to Eddie a little bit about it too, where he said, is there anything suggestions or roadblocks you ran into in this process or whatever. And so we talked about it some. Yeah, so definitely there were some things where I'm like, if I had it to do over again, I would do things differently. So
I would do X, Y, and Z. Well, thank you for paving the way and blazing that trail. I appreciate it on a personal level. So
sure.
We got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions in the chat, please make sure you get them to us, unless it's what's Buffy. In that case, ask
I
Google.
Can't help you there.
Just Google it out. And you had mentioned you had done some work with Rose. Was that Cavaliers you said you'd worked on?
Yeah, so I worked on Cavaliers. I've also worked with her a little bit on some of her stuff that she's doing just through her own through her Patreon, through Fantasy Heartbreaker, including Beautiful Anomalies, which is amazing and everyone should play it. And also I did a little bit of work on her Miserable Secrets game, which is also amazing. You should also play it. Rose is such a good game designer. She just, her brain has so many cool ideas in it, and she's so good at translating an idea into a game that's playable and that really gets across the feel of the experience that you're trying to give the players. So I love working with Rose.
Awesome. And uh, with the Cavaliers work, that has now, where is Cavaliers at in its production release schedule thing? Where are we sitting at with that right now? Do you have any
So
insight into that at the moment?
So the Cavaliers core has been out for a little while now.
Right.
The actual Cavaliers book, and there's a Jumpstart, I want to say too, that's out. And other than that, I know that Rose is working on developing another book for it, but I'm not working on that one, so I don't really know the
Gotcha,
details.
okay. Cool. It looks like such a incredible setting. So
It really is. It's so cool.
I'll talk about it as much as I can on the channel.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm just trying to think if there was anything else. What board games are you into, Roland Knight? What board games are you into?
Board games. See, I really like Talisman. I don't get to play it very often because it takes like 12 hours to play, but I love it. It's kind of my problem. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't think I'm familiar with it.
Oh, Talisman?
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually somebody Ian Lemke is doing an RPG, a tabletop RPG version of Talisman right now. Actually, it's been around for a long time. The board game. It's basically like it's like a D&D style adventure where everybody plays. You play a wizard or a barbarian or a knight or whatever. And the goal is to get to the middle of the board and then duke it out for supremacy. But there's all kinds of cool like items you pick up along the way and cool little events, and you can fight each other. And it's a very flavorful fantasy board game.
Cool. I will have to check that out. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love board games. My problem is that most of the board games that I love are ones that take forever to play. So like, I just don't have time anymore.
Right. Yeah. Like, let me clear a day.
Yeah, let me clear out the next 8 hours to sit and play this board game. Which I love it, but yeah.
It's a lot of at least. I mean, I don't play a whole lot of board games, but in my experience, a lot of those are like, because it takes you 4 hours to set the board up.
Mm-hmm. And it takes you, yeah, and it takes you another. If you've never played it before, it takes you another 4 hours to figure out how to play.
Right.
So yeah, I do love them though.
Yeah, I don't get nearly enough board game time anymore. I mean, when I was little, my family used to have like board game nights and stuff, but it was mostly, Monopoly and
right,
along those lines. Fairly.
Oh yeah, no, my family always played Monopoly until my sister almost killed me once, and we decided not to play Monopoly anymore.
I'm just the right age where I was right at the end of parents just actively not giving a shit what their children did to one another. So like we had violent outbreaks over Monopoly. I think my brother might still have a scar that's shaped like the boot.
Oh no!
For me, like pressing it into his face.
Oh my god!
It was very bad. Wisconsin in the '80s was not a safe place to.
Oh no! And so it's also I should mention, I guess it's not a board game per se, but I am a big Magic the Gathering fan. And it is, again, something I don't have a lot of time to play anymore, but I used to play it a ton. And Ravnica is like one of my favorite settings of all time.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah.
Have you checked out Guildmaster's Guide, bringing things full circle
yes.
back to tabletop?
So here's a funny story. When I was in college, was like the peak of my Magic the Gathering playing. We had a huge group in my co-ed nerd fraternity who used to just play Magic all the time. And so I at the time, when the first Ravnica block came out, I created my own Ravnica setting for D&D. And then I ran 3 campaigns in it. And so, like, fast forward, I don't know, 10 years, and suddenly Wizards announces that they're doing a Ravnica setting for D&D, and I'm like, why didn't you hire me? I did this 10 years ago.
I could have
Get
just
with the
mailed you my
times,
notes.
Wizards. Yeah. What is this about? So I was frustrated, but also really excited. The book is amazing. It looks gorgeous. I think they did a really good job, and I really want to run it when I have the time.
Well, you should make the time. It's everything I've read from it is really well done. I actually worked on a campaign that we released at DM's Guild. Me and Beatrice Diaz
Oh, cool.
put together a level 1 through 8 campaign up there that's done pretty well.
Nice.
Um, and it's just a really fun, rich setting that's very simultaneously incredibly not D&D while being very D&D friendly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about it is that it's very kind of unorthodox as far as like fantasy settings go, but it's not hard to translate into a system like D&D.
Right, it fits the category silos, if not the categories, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
the things, everything, there's an analog, if not a direct translation for everything.
Yeah, so the framework is there, even if the details are very different. So I really love Ravnica a lot.
Well, same. We'll have to commiserate more about our shared love of Ravnica at some point here in the near
future.
Definitely. So on that note, we are approaching the hour. Is there any convention appearances, social media things, charities, special interests that you want to point our dear sweet audience toward with our final minutes here?
Yeah, so I'm going to be at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, which is coming up very soon. I'm going to be running demos of Changeling and Contagion Chronicle there. So if anybody's in Philly and you want to come to PAX Unplugged and play some games with me, I'll be there. And I'm also going to be at Midwinter in January in, I forget right now where it is.
Milwaukee?
Yeah, Milwaukee. Thank you. I'll be there as well. So you can find me there. Let's see. The only other thing I want to mention, because I always mention this because I just love it so much, is so I know that folks on this Twitch channel might be familiar with Malcolm Shepard from his work on both Mage games and various other things for Onyx Path and for White Wolf back in the day, but he is the developer of Modern Age, which is Green Ronin's age system is so much fun. And Modern Age is the modern setting version of the age system. And Malcolm's the developer for that line. And I've worked on almost every Modern Age book that's come out so far. But I really want to plug Malcolm's setting, which is called Threefold, that he did for Modern Age. It's out now. You can get it. It has a jumpstart, I think, or some kind of like intro adventure. And it's basically an interplanar large set, like old school big kind of setting, lots and lots of details, and you can go to infinite planes. There's fantasy planes. There's Earth is more of kind of like a sci-fi setting, and then we've got sort of the angels and demons occult psychic angle, and so there's these three big kind of setting aspects that come together and clash in all kinds of really interesting ways. So check out Threefold, please. It's very, very cool.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely do that. And Megan, thank you so very much for taking the time to come hang out and talk about games and your work on them, and sneak in a little bit of discussion of Ravnica. We can always do that whenever you want.
Nice. Okay.
And I really appreciate it. Everybody that's watching at home, thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure that you are following the channel so you know when we go live. If you've not yet done so, please subscribe. If you're an Amazon Prime user, you get a free sub every month, and we would just love to be your free sub. It helps us continue to create quality content for you and keep the channel going. I know that We will be doing more of these Q&A sessions, trying to talk to as many of the writers and developers as we can, kind of get everybody familiar with sort of the names and the minds behind these books, and give you the audience a chance to interact a little bit more directly. And I just saw in the chat, Mr. Nobody's just hopped on and had hoped to listen in and get a little more familiar with the setting and get a little bit more involved with the community. Mr. Nobody's, these videos do go up pretty much immediately on the channel for subscribers, and then usually within about a week you can watch it on YouTube as well, so you can catch up that way as well in case you miss us when we're live.
Actually, can I this person said they were trying to get more involved with the community. There's actually a Onyx Path Discord.
Yes.
That you can join, and there are a couple of unofficial discords too that a lot of the writers and developers we hang out in all the time, and if people have questions, they can come drop in and ask them, and there's usually somebody hanging out there that can answer it. So I would say the discords are a good way to get into the community.
I forget Discord a lot because I am an elder millennial, and I'm right at the age where Discord's just a little bit confusing for me.
Oh yeah, no, I'm there with you. I'm an older millennial too. And for a while, I was like, I don't understand this Discord thing. What is this? But it was actually the Chronicles of Darkness Discords that drew me in. So I'm familiar now.
Yeah, I guess eventually I'll shed my old ways and learn how to use the Discord.
Get with the times.
Modern up. But yes, definitely do head over and join the Discord if you haven't. There's channels, I think pretty much for like every game pretty much has its own channel, and there's some general channels and some looking for group channels. It's a really good resource. So yeah, thank you all so much. We will see you all again real soon, and be good to yourselves and each other, as Mayor Jerry Springer used to say. See you all later.